32.825. .166. That was your fastest lap of the session.
All right, let's take a look at that. So we will start. I'm not going to do slow motion for this. We're going to start from pit road because I'll show you guys the trick. So you want to keep your tires as cool as possible for the actual hot lap. So what I do is I just drive off of pit road in fourth gear, full throttle. You can do this multiple ways. You can just use throttle control, I guess, to not go too fast off of pit road. But I mean, uses no brain, and I always like methods that you don't have to use your brain. So full throttle, fourth gear, you'll pick up your speed with tons of time. In fact, you might even want to coast a little longer than I did, but this was probably fine. So coming to our first lap, really nothing special on the first lap. I just kind of run the bottom, middle, and 1 and 2, try to minimize wheel inputs, because the more wheel inputs you have, the more you're going to heat up your tires. So just kind of make sure to minimize all that. Then 3 and 4 for the outlap, or for the first lap coming to the second lap, which is hot lap. Some people like to be right by the wall. I don't love being right by the wall for a couple reasons. The first reason is that the wall arrow, I think, slows your car down just a tiny bit, and every bit matters in super speedway. And the second thing is that at Atlanta specifically, you want to straighten out your wheel as early as possible. So if I'm right by the wall, I'm going to have to keep my wheel turned a little bit longer than if I'm right here, and I can kind of straighten it out right here. So I just like being about a lane down. See how I kind of slide up to the wall at the end, but that's so that I could straighten out my wheel quicker. So now the question is, do we cut the apron here or not? I don't think you cut the first part of the apron. I think that you lose a little too much momentum. But I do think you cut the second part of the apron. And you see I lost a little bit of time because in my previous time I really cut the apron hardcore. But the problem with cutting the apron hardcore is that if you want to make up time, by the time you get back up onto the track, it's like right here, and you don't have enough time to go wide to enter the corner, which is fine. You can still full throttle it. But the thing is that you just lose a lot of momentum by having to turn the wheel more if you turn the corner shallower. So I like to be about 1 lane-ish up on entry, kind of ease into the corner to not use too much steering wheel, and just wrap the bottom. And then the most important part of the lap is going to be coming off of 2 here. So a lot of people think, oh, I need to stay on the bottom for as long as possible. And you can do that. You can full throttle on the bottom. That's great. But the problem is you're turning your wheel too much and you're scrubbing speed. The same idea as we were talking about before. So what you want to do is once your car starts sliding up, you just let it happen. You let it happen for about a lane, and then you start opening up your wheel, and then you should end up about a lane and a half up. That's kind of my go-to. So you see I ended up maybe a little bit higher than lane and a half up, but you don't want to be right by that wall because of the wall arrow. Same thing for 3 and 4, except we're only going half a straightaway. So when we're only going half a straightaway, our momentum doesn't matter that much. And if our momentum doesn't matter that much, I'm going to keep it on the bottom, and I'm going to cut the apron coming to the start-finish line. And that's going to be marginally faster. Now, if I had to drive that whole straightaway there, then that would have been worse by a lot. But because we only had to drive half this straightaway, it was worth it to cut the apron here and lose that momentum for the short-term gain. All right, very good. All right, so I have a couple notes on long run, so stick around for that. All right, a couple notes on long run here. Yes, it's kind of a super speedway, but tires will come into play a little bit. Okay, so when you're driving in a pack, you want to prefer to be on the bottom if nothing's really happening. Let's say it's halfway through the race, everyone's kind of just chilling. Maybe a bunch of cars have wrecked and now there isn't that many people left. If there's a case where you have a choice, you would want to be on the bottom over the top, because you can see, I'll compare this corner. I can turn really small amounts on the bottom, and then you kind of let it drift up a bit unless somebody's right on your outside. Whereas if you're driving kind of the middle high lane trying to make something work, I'm actually having to turn a little bit more over the course of the corner. And along with traveling a longer distance, this will mean that the outside wears tire at a faster rate than the inside over the course of a race. Now, does that mean you're going to lose the draft if you run the outside over and over again? No, doesn't mean that at all. But what it does mean is that if push comes to shove at the end of the race, the people that are going to be able to make moves and push and make lines work are going to be the people that have the slight advantage on tire. So just keep that in mind. If you have nothing to race for, the bottom is going to be where it's at. Sometimes you even want to lift a little bit at the beginning of the corner, but I don't think that's completely necessary. Maybe into like a big draft. But anything to minimize your steering inputs will save tire in this race. And then you'll have an easier or harder time making moves at the end of the race based on how you treat the first beginning of the race. Now, as for strategy, I always love the strategy of staying out front at Atlanta because this track is extremely narrow for a super speedway type race, which means that when a wreck happens, it doesn't really matter if you're driving at the back. If you're not able to full stop before a wreck, you're probably going to be in it. So I just don't understand why people hang out in the back of Atlanta races, because if you're in the draft at all, it's probably going to be very hard for you to dead stop for any wreck in front of you. So unless you're not in the draft at all, which is a bad idea in of itself, then you're probably going to be at risk of getting in a big one. Whereas if you're in the front, it's kind of hard for people to pass because usually the inside groups up a lot better than the outside. So if you're just on the inside of the first few bits and you use those qualifying tips to qualify towards the front, it's a lot easier to maintain track position at Atlanta than even at Daytona, and especially at Talladega. So I would just want to preach my truth of you want to be at the front at Atlanta. I don't care about what people say. Being at the front at Atlanta is how you win races, and being in the middle and the back of the pack at Atlanta is how you wreck. And if by some stroke of luck you are able to get through the big one from the middle or the back, well, it's also hard to pass the people in the front towards the end of the race, especially when there's not a lot of cars left. So just everything adds up that the bottom is going to be where you want to be at Atlanta. Alright, if you have any questions, leave them below. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope to see you all on the track.